Boom. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Now, sometimes retaining talent means you got to have a great compensation plan. And if you're struggling retaining talent, maybe this is the episode that'll change that for you. Let's get this one started. Here we go.
Shut up and sit down.
Look, a business can give you everything you want in life: prestige, wealth, freedom. It can also take everything away from you. This show is for those who are willing to take that risk. These are the real life stories of entrepreneurs. But before we start, I have one small favor to ask. Please leave a comment. It can be advice, critiques, tips, feedback, or share this with someone because your engagement is the most valuable and most powerful form of social currency. So thank you, and welcome to another episode of Business Bros. Business Bros, are your compensation plans driving growth or dragging your business down? Today's guest transforms pay systems from messy costs into powerful growth engines. He helps CEOs align pay with performance, keep top talent, and build a culture of ownership. So please welcome to the show, Mr. Tom Miller. Welcome to the program, Tom.
Hey, I appreciate it. That's the standard greeting I get anytime I walk into a room with my employees. So that's awesome.
That's what I'm talking about. I wish that was what I woke up to every single day. But fortunately, some of these topics are probably not the most exciting, but definitely pull the most impact. And if you do it right, you can develop a beautiful culture in your company where you do walk in feeling that kind of excitement. Tom, give me a little bit of background on yourself. Give me the epic origin story.
Well, years ago, I was doing benefits for companies, kind of the health plan, the 401k plan, that kind of stuff. And actually, when I was talking to business owners, I found that while that was helpful, what they were most concerned with was, how do I pay my employees? How much do I pay them? Should I give them bonuses? Do I need to give them stock? Those kinds of things. And so as I researched that and became familiar with it, I decided to really just kind of toss out the old business model and begin offering compensation advice to businesses. And that was 30 years ago. And it's been great. We've served over 1,200 small businesses since then. So it's kind of fun.
The very first business I ever had, of course, started by accident because my brother got fired from his job working at Cox Communications. We needed to pay the bill. So we started kind of helping people repair their computers back in the Windows 98 days. And when we found a niche and it became a little successful, we hired one person, hired another person. We had to figure out how to pay these people. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I looked to was the previous job he had. Well, how did Cox Cable pay your contractors? And we just modeled it based off what an existing company does, not necessarily really researching that new industry or how it affects things. We just kind of said, hey, it works for them, it could work for us. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes companies are making when it comes to setting up their compensation plans?
Yeah, well, you were experiencing what every company experiences. We simply call it compensation chaos. How do I make this decision? But then I hire the next employee, and do I pay them the same as the last one? As companies grow, they have to emerge out of that compensation chaos into what we call compensation clarity by organizing their pay structure to be consistent and fair. Because fundamentally, what starts happening is that employers start thinking about compensation as a way to, they think of it as an expense instead of an investment. And then it deteriorates sometimes into kind of, how do I manipulate employee behavior to get what I want? They're not thinking about creating true partnership with employees. So that's a key, and perhaps a theme of our conversation today is, how do you create growth partners in your business, and how does compensation influence that? So that's might get us started.
Well, partnerships sometimes don't last the length of the company. And when you bring a partner on, or when you bring somebody in, sometimes deciding whether they're a partner or an employee, it gets difficult because nobody cares about your business the way you do, obviously. And those first couple employees that are coming in, if they stand with the company for a long period of time, could be very, foundational, could be very impactful for the business, where they deserve maybe stock options and things like that. But as we go down the line and start, bringing in more the technical aspect of people versus the executive people, like how does a company kind of separate the two? How can we align pay with shareholder goals, with owner goals, just and so that we're ultimately impacting business growth?
Yeah, great question. I think first let's redefine partner a little bit. So formally, a partner is somebody that probably has stock or an ownership interest, a membership interest in the business. But I think the better way to think about partnership is that somebody that has a mindset where they're thinking like owners, they're behaving like owners. They've moved beyond just their own interests into thinking about the partnership they have with the owners of the business. And that shifts the way they imagine their own role. Instead of just saying, what are my job duties? They think about, how do I contribute to the success of the organization? And once that clicks, now you have what some people call impact players, or we call them growth partners. They begin to see that they have a unified vision with the owners, a unified financial vision. That's our company name is VisionLink. So we want to link the vision of the owners with the visions of the employees by having everybody recognize that their financial interests are aligned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, and that's kind of the thought process when companies were thinking about stock options early on. The reason why a company would offer a stock option is so that the employee has a vested interest in the company. And hopefully that vision of their goals are aligned. They're working for the company, putting forth their best foot forward so that everybody works together. You're working together with the other employees because you're ultimately going for the same goal. You're working together with your shareholders. You're ultimately going for the same goal. But it kind of gets, that's something that happened, decades ago, where we started to see that type of thing. And it kind of shifts. I've heard things like phantom stocks and different types of strategies that people put into play, crazy vesting periods for some of these guys when their stock options go into play. Can you explain like what phantom stock is and why it might be gaining popularity, and why a stock option plan or vesting periods might how can you structure them to make them work really well for your company versus just kind of being a joke ultimately?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the very word phantom stock is kind of funny, isn't it? Phantom sounds like there's nothing there, but it's a very real compensation technique that we recognize and promote openly. We've built probably 500, maybe 600 phantom stock plans for companies. So here's the idea. Public companies are always going to use stock, restricted stock units, stock options. Don't want to get too technical on all those, but those become actual ownership stakes in the business. And it dilutes the actual owners, the shareholders, when you bring in people who get stock or phantom stock, stock or stock options. Now, in a private company, you don't need to do that. Commonly in a startup company, they think, well, let's give stock or phantom stock to our employees. It is kind of a currency that can have real value there, but it's tougher to administer actual stock plans. There's a tax consequence to an employee when they get stock. They have to pay taxes on it. So here's what phantom stock is. Phantom stock is a deferred bonus, meaning if I gave you phantom stock today in VisionLink, it'd be a certificate, a written promise that says you got X number of units, kind of like stock, and they're going to be cashed in or monetized in the future under certain events. And you might ask, okay, well, how much are they worth? Well, the answer to that is that's going to depend on how well the company grows. So phantom stock is self-financing. If the company doesn't grow, it doesn't cost me anything. But as the company grows and you start cashing in your phantom units, the value will be tied to the appreciation in the growth of the company. So it has the same financial effect as a stock or stock option, but without some of the baggage relating to taxes and dilution and internal other bureaucratic complications. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm assuming though these still have certain vesting periods or like performance KPIs that are involved in order to meet these phantom stock options or bonuses, essentially, correct?
Yes, you definitely want a vesting schedule. The vesting schedule says, hey, if you leave too soon, you don't get the value from the phantom shares. You got to stay around and help us grow. So we're going to set a time frame, a vesting schedule. Maybe it's 3 years or 5 years. And then there's also a date when the units actually monetize. That could be right when they vest, or it could be even later. But if you do these phantom awards to employees annually, they begin to accumulate potentially very significant value. We have clients where their employees are monetizing 6-figure values or 7-figure values over time. So you can build real wealth inside a phantom stock plan for those employees who help you grow the company. But if they leave too soon, they're walking away from that cash.
So Tom, who's the ideal client for Vision Link? There are so many different types of companies. There are people who are at the very beginning. Maybe they have their 1 or 2 employees. There are other ones that are turning that corner. They break that 50 employee marker, and so forth. Who's the ideal client for Vision Link?
So traditionally, historically, we have served what I'll call the middle market, companies with 100, 200, 500, or 1,000 employees. And we still provide value and services for them through our consulting team. Our consulting team is very experienced at building out these kinds of plans for our clients. But we made an intentional decision to invest in software that can serve the smallest of companies, 1 or 2 employees, or 10 or 15 or 20. So we built a software product called Vision Link Direct. And it's essentially a self-serve product. And we've trained Vision Link Direct to coach the user through the system to build out their own bonus plan or to build out their own phantom stock plan, and without having to pay for a consultant. So it's much cheaper, affordable, and available to anyone. They can add some consulting help if they get stuck. But as we add AI now to the product, you essentially are going to have a self-assisting consultant bot who has the same knowledge as our consulting team. So we're trying to democratize and demonetize the expertise that we've accumulated over 30 years.
Now, earlier we kind of mentioned how the compensation plan that you put into play may be hurting your company because of retention. Can you give me an example of what a company is looking at inside maybe with their employees or with their executives, where they would need a service like this, where they're realizing that, maybe they're not seeing their bottom line as affected because they're meeting some of their KPIs and their goals, but they're not keeping or retaining some of that talent. There's a lot of turnover that's happening that essentially is affecting their growth capabilities, even though they might be hitting some of these month-to-month KPIs. How can a compensation plan retain top talent?
So retention is one of the 3 pillars or objectives of any compensation strategy. Let me kind of go in order how we present it. We say, if you're going to have a compensation plan, especially if you're going to have, let's call them incentive plans, they must achieve 3 things for you. First, improve employee performance or productivity. So employees must feel energized by the plan, motivated, and feel like they have an interest in helping the company improve by their performance improving. So performance is number 1. Number 2 is retention, or we call it lock in premier talent. If you want great talent, you want to attract them and keep them, you have to have something that keeps them there and shows them if they create value, they're going to harvest value in the future. And the third thing is your compensation plan should be targeted at improving shareholder value, growing the enterprise value. So if you present a value proposition to your team that focuses on those 3 things appropriately, they're going to stay around. Well, at least compensation won't be the reason they leave, if they do leave. people might leave for a lot of reasons, right? You can't control that every reason with compensation. But what you don't want them to say is, the grass is greener compensation-wise down the street. This doesn't mean, by the way, let me stress, you just have to have the highest salaries in town. Salaries don't have to be that high. If the upside opportunity is meaningful, if it's believable, and it's clearly communicated to employees, then they're likely to stay around. And retention of employees has never been a bigger issue in American business. It is a crucial thing to do and strive for these days.
It's tough. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, my grandparents, my parents, they had this mentality where they could work for a company for like 30 years, get that watch at the end, and have a nice pension that'll take care of them for, into their later years. But today, a lot of people don't stay with companies very long. They're always looking for where the grass is greener. And I think companies need to realize that if they water the grass a little bit better where they are, they might be able to retain that top talent a little bit more. What should a CEO look for when designing that long-term incentive plan? Because remember, the ultimate goal here is to create that culture of ownership. And with the generation that we have today, it's very difficult to even keep people long-term, much less think of the job that they go to as a place that they possibly own.
I love your analogy of watering the grass properly. I might steal that from you unless you trademark it. So I think I might be using that. And that's what your compensation plan should be doing. It shouldn't necessarily say, oh, look how much money how much higher we're paying and more we're paying you than all the competition. It should say, you are aligned with the owners of this business. If the owners do well, you're going to do well. Now, then the compensation plan becomes the manifestation of that philosophy. What becomes most important after that is constant communication, updating and communicating regularly how the compensation program, how that grass is growing, so that they can see that if they stay over time and they perform, it's not a gimme. And that's what the old pensions used to be. The pension was a gimme. Hang around, you're going to get the pension. Mm-hmm. The mindset today is, yes, we want you to stay around if you're productive and you're happy here. And we're going to make sure you have a wealth accumulation opportunity if you do, all hinged on growing enterprise value.
What are some of the bigger mistakes you see companies making when they start deciding on a stock option plan? Something that you see over and over again, and if you could wave a magic wand, prevent people from even making this mistake in the first place.
Yeah. Well, there's several mistakes to avoid. One is to budget carefully. If you're using actual stock options, or phantom stock options, anticipate the growth of the company and create a budget. How much of the increase in the value of the company are we willing to commit to our team? So if let's say we're a company that's worth $2 million and we're going to become a company that's worth 20 million or 100 million, carve out a percentage of that growth. Let's say it's 10%. It could be 20%. And then stay within that budget so that you realize that you are allocating a percentage of your future growth to the employees who help you create that growth. Then as you provide the units, the shares, the phantom shares to the employees, don't do it all at once. If I was going to give you 10,000 units, I'm not going to give them to you all at once and have a single vesting schedule. I'm going to let you earn maybe 1,000 a year for 10 years. You can still accumulate the same value, but each year you're making a contribution so that we celebrate the awarding of those new units each year. It's a meaningful event that you've earned more and they're going to grow to more long-term value for you. So those are the couple of the tips that I give to people when they're beginning to share equity or phantom equity.
In your experience, what do you think separates companies that succeed with incentive strategies that they put into place? I mean, you've seen the stock options, you've seen the phantom stock, you've seen all these different things. What separates a company? What makes them successful in their implementation process compared to those that fail using maybe similar products but not correct strategy?
So let me frame it this way. First of all, we can use the term incentive strategy. I like the term value sharing. Incentive sounds like we're dangling a carrot. Keep reaching for that carrot, you'll get it sooner or later. What we want to say is, hey, if you create value, you deserve some of it. So we've got to define what we mean by value creation for our customers and for our shareholders. Now, when we express the value sharing plan, we have to have a short-term component and a long-term component. The short-term component is commonly called like the annual bonus or the annual incentive plan, and that's fine. I guess you can call it whatever you want. But again, we want to say, help us create value this year. Here's how we define it, and we're going to share some of it with you. What's important is that you don't build that plan on the wrong premise. The wrong premise is you are smart enough to engineer a plan that will change employee behavior. Motivation is intrinsic. It comes from the inside. I can't design an incentive plan that's going to motivate you per se. I want you to feel empowered and feel like an owner and desirous of helping the organization grow and celebrate the award of the value sharing payment at the end of the year as something that we all contributed to. So incentive plans that are overly complicated, too many metrics, too many factors to keep track of, actually have been proven to produce a negative impact on the business. So you have to keep it simple. If you make it too simple, which is, I'm going to wait till the end of the year and see how we did and decide if I pay bonuses out to anyone, now you're creating an entitlement mentality. So you got to avoid, on the one hand, complexity, which backfires, or entitlement, which crushes engagement. And if you can balance in the middle and find a value sharing arrangement that rewards short-term and builds meaningful value over time, like Phantom Stock as an example, now you've got employees connecting to how the owners think about the business, which is, we've got to have good annual results and we want to grow our enterprise value. That was maybe a little long-winded, but hopefully it captures the spirit of treat employees like partners when you're creating your compensation program.
And, the bottom line here is there's so many different ways to go about this, so many different strategies you can implement, products and services that you can put into place to help retain this talent, that you definitely need help from a professional to come in and help you devise a plan. Tell me a little bit more about Vision League Pro, Vision League Direct. How do you help simplify this complex process?
Well, we begin by helping a client establish their pay philosophy. Call it the compensation philosophy statement. So we draft, think maybe a page and a half, and it's the foundational document about why we pay, how much we pay, what components of pay we use. This is useful to any size company, and it really becomes crucial as you begin making intricate pay decisions as the company grows. Imagine hiring a new employee. You're in that interview process that it's starting to get a little awkward because they want to join you and you want them to come to you, and you're going to present the pay package and you're wondering if it's going to be enough, right? And that's what the employees think, the potential employees thinking too. If they read your compensation philosophy statement right there before you show them the offer, it tells them how serious you are about following appropriate practices and being fair and reviewing pay and providing pay growth opportunities. So it eliminates the down the road conversation when they come back to your office a year later and say, hey, I need more money, I need this or that, because you're able to say, you remember the pay philosophy? Here's when that happens and how that happens. So it creates a mature adult relationship, if you will, surrounding the pay conversation. Once you've done that, and then you validate pay levels that are market competitive and build a value sharing arrangement for employees, they begin to trust the compensation decision-making process in the organization, whether you have 3 employees, 300, or 3,000.
I like how you describe that because I teach a class called Financial Algebra to high school seniors. And one of the sections here that we talk about is when they go into basically go into a job interview. We talk about more on the career aspect. And one of the things I mentioned to them is oftentimes when you go into your interviews, speaking to the hiring managers are limited on the compensation that they can pay out. But the negotiation can definitely happen in the benefits aspect of it, the other side of what's available. And if your company has some of these strategic things in place, all of a sudden retaining some of this top talent or acquiring some of this talent, because you might be limited on the month to month pay compensation. But if you offer these other pieces to it, now all of a sudden it becomes a little more valuable. What would you say to people coming in, on the bottom end? They're coming in as employees and they're looking to kind of negotiate into a good contract. What should they be looking for when they come into this, so that way employers know what they should offer when they're going into the interview process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I forgot to answer the question about VisionLink Pro and VisionLink Direct 2. I'll circle back to that at the end of this response, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally.
So an employee, I think the employee should ask the question on the other side of the table that I was suggesting the employer should offer, which is, here's the employee, what's your compensation philosophy here? How do you reward people? What should I expect over time if I perform well? So this gauges whether or not the response from the employer is consistent with the expectations of the potential hire. Are you looking for high salaries? Do you expect to be paid a wage that's above market? Well, then that's where you have to negotiate from. If you're more of in an entrepreneurial mindset, which a lot of young employees are given the option, then they may accept a reasonable wage that's not super high, as long as they can see the growth opportunity and it's clearly laid out for them. That can mean as job progression. It can also mean higher performance leading to variable pay arrangements like value sharing plans, short-term and long-term. What we do is with our software coupled with our consultants is we've streamlined and collapsed the typical cost of building out incentive programs for employees. And now we're building AI into it. So when a client uses the VisionLink Direct product, they have essentially a consultant bot who has all of the knowledge of our 30 years and 1,200 companies served expertise embedded in the bot, so that they can now travel through the software and build the plan with the help of this agentic consultant, and without having to pay $30 or $40 or $50,000 for a consultant. And that's where we're plowing all of our resources and energy, is to make this available to companies of all sizes.
Well, Tom, it's definitely something that every business owner needs to start thinking about. When you're a solopreneur, it's one thing. It's just you by yourself, a lifestyle business. But as you start bringing employees on and your company starts to grow, you definitely want to have a pay plan in place to structure, not just when you're first hiring, but over the long term, so that when you do scale, when you do grow, you're starting to retain and keep those people. And if I'm a business owner getting ready to do that next step, hire my first employee, or I'm a business owner that's trying to retain top talent and I'm losing people, how can I reach out to you? How can I find out more about what you offer, schedule appointments? What can I do to find out how I can get my executive plans or my compensation plans lined up so that I have that good company culture of ownership?
Well, thank you. Sure. So we can be found at visionlink.co, so not com, but co. And I'm happy to receive email from anyone who has questions about their circumstance, and we'll try and give some help over the email, and obviously open to calls and with people to discuss their situation too. My email is there on the screen, tmiller@visionlink.co. And we can always connect you and offer a complimentary consultation with anyone who's interested in learning more or just getting a little bit of help. I also recently published a book. It's available on Amazon. It's an Amazon bestseller called The Growth Partners Effect. And Growth Partners Effect talks about a lot of the things we discussed today, gives examples and stories of businesses who've used these principles successfully.
You said the Growth Partners Effect.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna pop that up on the screen here too, ladies and gentlemen. Look, at the end of the day, people, it's a struggle. You know, working with employees, trying to keep employees, trying to hire them, trying to keep them around, trying to treat them right. It is is definitely a struggle. So Tom wrote a book, The Growth Patterns Effect. Pick that up, or send them a link. Send them an email, or go over to the link visionlink.co and start having the conversation. If you don't have the conversation, you're going to be stuck in the same spot that you're in today. No action gets you no results. Or you can start asking and inquiring about what's going on. Speak to professionals who've been setting up plans like this for multiple companies for a number of years now. Visionlink.co. And Tom's email, by the way, is tmiller@visionlink.co. Give him a shot. Let them know what's going on in your business, and then check out what they got going on with VisionLink Pro and VisionLink Direct. If you're a smaller company, you'll have the opportunity to set up your compensation plan. If you're a bigger company, you'll have that access to this consultation, as well as the entire team there at VisionLink. So visionlink.co, make sure you guys check it out. Tom, any last minute thoughts before we head out?
Yeah, I would just say that no matter how big your company is, it's never too soon to start structuring compensation, thinking about it as an investment where you can ultimately measure the return on the dollars you invest in your team, rather than just seeing it as the largest expense on your P&L. Just that mindset shift alone can be a super benefit to anybody running a business.
Absolutely. Plus, you never know. You might end up with some of those really famous teams like, the Googles and the Twitters, where they have some great company experiences. You love the place you go to work all of a sudden every day because it feels like family and everybody feels like they're well taken care of. That's what ends up happening when you do it right. Tom, thank you very much for being on the program. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we got for you guys today. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. And we're out.
It's over. Go home.
Is your business in need of marketing? Try starting a podcast. But not just any podcast. Podcast like a pro. We can show you how to take your business from being invisible to becoming a brand people trust. Go to www.businessbros.biz